So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with Ukraine. And the Telegraph has a piece here claiming that the Ukrainians are turning the table on Russia because they checked one major breakthrough that the Russian forces recently did as they were surrounding two of the big cities that sort of form the linchpin of Ukraine's defense. So if you were to sort of look at a map here, this is the Pokrovsk area. This is one of the linchpins of Ukraine's defense. The Russians advanced here, and it seems the Ukrainians are trying to surround them and cut them off, which is kind of important, kind of not that important.
That's been done since even World War One, hasn't it?
Exactly. Whereas in reality, if you look here in the Kharkiv region, the Russians are doing a pretty important advance towards Kupiansk, and they are working their way towards the city of Liman, after which they'll target Izium, and the objective would be to collapse the Ukrainian front line. So instead of being told about the details of the big picture, we're being told that, the Ukrainians have pushed back one offensive here, and that means that they are actually winning now, and the tables are being turned. Fake news, essentially. Or at best, very, very incomplete news.
Big spin.
Yes.
Let's exaggerate this one little positive bit of news that we've got to paint the whole thing as positive.
Exactly. And now Trump is saying that after getting to fully know and understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, the economic trouble it's causing Russia, also not true. Ukraine, with the support of the EU, can fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. So we had Trump earlier saying that Crimea is a non-starter. Let's freeze the conflict where it is and accept that the Russians have taken 4 Ukrainian provinces, leave it a little bit in dispute. Now he's saying, no, the Ukrainians can throw back Russia fully.
What happened to the Trump who was telling Zelensky off earlier this year that everybody was celebrating over?
It's quite a U-turn, isn't it?
Finally, we've got a leader who's going to push back and tell Zelensky where he can stick it and let them know that America doesn't get involved in these things. What happened? What's happening with the mineral deal? Did that just fall through? I thought there was going to be some kind of agreement.
Zelensky signed it at the end of the day, and he's in the process of selling Ukraine to BlackRock and to other big investment banks who are going to be really the only beneficiaries of a Ukrainian victory. But this is now happening, and we are now in a situation...
So we're all excited for ESG and DEI in Ukraine.
Yes.
At the end of this conflict,
yes.
Right?
Some victory for Ukraine, right?
You had Kuleba, the former foreign minister of Ukraine, saying that they're going to have to bring in people from Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, to help restore Ukraine to greatness. See, this is what Ukraine always was.
They're going to do rebuild, toilet infrastructure. I don't know about that personally. I don't see the expertise coming from those parts of the world.
You didn't know that Bangladesh has a long history of Russian Orthodoxy, and this is always what it has been, and it's always been the builder of Ukraine? Really?
I never heard that.
Your grasp of history is so
I know, I'm sorry.
It's quite remarkable that on a long enough time scale, some shorter, some longer, since the 20th century, you win a war, potentially in this case, you win a war with America on your side, all of a sudden you have to open up your borders.
Yeah.
To all sorts of third world populations.
You win a war, you lose your country.
Yeah, why does that have to be part of the deal?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a really good question. Anyway, he goes on to call Russia a paper tiger and says that they're running out of gasoline. Also, just not true.
They've got massive reserves.
I don't understand the logic behind it, but here we are. Ukraine, on a long timeline, they will be able to get back their country in its original form and maybe go further.
That's an explicit threat then, isn't it? If you're going to continue supporting them going further, that means an invasion of Russia.
Yes. At which point, if the thing is, the Russians can't lose this, because if they thought they were losing, they'd go nuclear. And so it's just not going to happen that the Russians are going to lose this conflict. It's just that it is going to be that the cost to the West and to Ukraine will be made higher. And it seems here that what Trump is really doing is trying to put Europe in an even bigger bind when it comes to Ukraine, and keep the war going while making the Europeans pay for the equipment. The only thing that seems to have changed is that the American aid will fall and it will turn into weapons sales from the American military-industrial complex that will be funded by European taxpayers, British taxpayers,
So it's
among
going to
others,
be a wealth transfer from Europe to America.
with the insistence that the Europeans buy a lot more American energy. So here's Trump going off in the United Nations.
And look where we are right now in just a short period of time. The only question now is how many more lives will be needlessly lost on both sides. China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one?
So the thing is that the Americans are still buying uranium from Russia. They haven't stopped doing that. And that European economies are in the process of collapsing. And people who are cheering this are just sort of, cheering Trump blindly for whatever he does. But the US is saying that it can replace all Russian oil and gas in Europe. Big problem with that. Russian gas and oil is pipelined, meaning that it comes in at a fraction of the cost. And coal obviously not being pipelined. But closer distance, lower shipping costs, much cheaper.
Shame about that Nord Stream explosion.
Who did that?
We never really did get to the bottom of that, did we?
Who really did that?
You can sort of see who might benefit from it, though, can't you?
Yeah.
Obviously, Russia blowing up their own pipeline, which gave us more incentive to engage in peace talks with them.
So, anyway, the Americans are saying they can replace all of the Russian oil and gas, which is not true. And what has been happening is that for the last 2 or 3 years, there has been talk of how German industry in particular is collapsing. This is from 2023, where everybody in the know has understood that the German manufacturing sector must have cheap Russian energy, especially gas, if it is going to function. And it doesn't help that the Germans, in their green stupidity, decided to shut down nuclear. It really doesn't help. But instead, they're trying to do solar and wind, which can't be used for industry because they're completely unreliable, and which are insanely expensive.
Because many of the industries in Germany, like they excel in things like chemical industries, where if you interrupt the process, then you ruin the process. And
Pretty
you
much.
have to start again in some cases. Obviously, I'm no expert. I'm a psychologist, not a chemist. But
Right.
still, I know enough that it's not ideal.
So for the chemicals industry, it's a disaster. For the auto industry, it's a disaster. Usually, energy is 10-15% of your costs in manufacturing. And so when it goes up by 30% or 40%, given how slim the profit margin is to begin with, it's a disaster. So manufacturing is extremely sensitive to energy prices. And you see this story being repeated in 2004. Europe is deindustrializing. This is economic suicide. This is Forbes, right? This isn't some left-wing pro-Russian thing. This isn't some right-wing alternative media. This is Forbes. This is about as mainstream as it gets. You see this being constantly repeated. I think this is the International Banker. Again, escalating deindustrialization problem, January 2025.
And just 100 years ago, Germany was like the industrial heartland of all of Europe.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Yeah.
And it still is. And now we have headlines about Rust Belt on the Rhine. Whereas what the Americans are saying is that, look, we can operate Nord Stream. What the Russians are saying is that, look, we can start exporting energy to you. We can save you economically. You don't have to do this. But obviously there is a price, and the price is Ukraine. And if you think of the context of this escalation, you can see it on my Realpolitik show. The reason for this is because NATO expanded to the Black Sea and expanded to the Baltic Sea, meaning that it surrounded Russia's ports. And that's why when Ukraine first kicked off, the first thing the Russians did was save Crimea. Why? Because Sevastopol is where the Russian Navy is based.
I mean, it's why there was the Crimean War against Britain.
Exactly.
In the 19th century.
Exactly. So this has consistently been a theme of NATO expanding and saying Russia is reacting unreasonably. And now what's happening is that the Americans are saying to the Europeans, if you want to stay in this war, you have to buy all of your energy from us, which the Americans can't provide in full, contrary to what they're saying. They don't have enough spare capacity. And you have to buy all of your weapons from us. And then what's left for Europeans? Well, for foreigners, but then what else? So the Americans are basically using Ukraine to batter Europe, in part because European leaders are so delusional that they insist on fighting Russia. If they had told Zelensky, look, this war is lost, nobody wins a land war against Russia on its own borders, things would be much better for Europe economically. And it could turn to the actual threat, which is the collapsing and changing demographics of Europe. But they don't want to think about that. Instead, they want to collapse the demographics of Ukraine and replace it with Bangladeshis and Indians and Nigerians and what have you.
And this isn't in the interest of United States citizens either, because
No.
I can imagine that if they're exporting a decent proportion of their domestically produced energy, then that's going to push the energy price in America up as well. And it's already gone up.
If basically
beforehand.
Russian gas successfully gets closed off to the West, all it means is that everybody in the West is paying even more for energy. That's all it means.
And we already have enough problems with price rises with energy anyway.
Exactly.
Which has been just destroying domestic economies.
Exactly.
Like, think if you're in England or anywhere in the West right now, how many shops, just by people who are local to your town, have shut down recently purely because energy prices have skyrocketed, meaning they can't afford that.
It's also going to have unparalleled permanent economic destructive potential as well, because the people who can absorb the cost of the increasing energy are already well established. So
Yes.
what it's going to fundamentally do is transfer more wealth to the existing elite from ordinary people.
Exactly. So what's happening as a result of all of this is that even in North Rhine-Westphalia, the AfD is gaining ground quickly. The SPD, which was traditionally the main power there, has sort of had their vote share collapse. And slowly we're heading towards a situation where the attempts to continuously isolate the AfD and keep them out of government in any way are becoming less and less realistic. Unless the CDU, which is the traditional conservatives, ally with the Greens, who are a bunch of lunatic communists.
I think that would be a difficult move.
I
But
think
they
they
wouldn't
would.
put it past them, though.
I
They
think
would
they
do
would.
it. They would do it.
These people, ever since 45, Germany especially, has been just told that you must do anything to stop the quote-unquote far right.
Yes.
Who are
from
actually
rising.
liberals. The AfD is a liberal party.
A reminder,
Yes.
it's led by a lesbian whose partner is Sri Lankan. This is not the far right, guys. Like, for me, this is very lefty. And I think for anybody sane, this is quite progressive.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that the AfD is far right, just, like, if I was to rule Germany one day, that would not be tolerated. But anyway. So the result of all of this is that the people who are rising are the AfD. And according to Deutsche Welle, these are Putin's best friends.
Are they?
I think their
They
interests
have
are
been
opposite.
interested in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been more interested in peace, which theoretically Meloni was at some point, reconciling with Russia. So we have to remember these people lie all the time. Zelensky was elected as the candidate who would figure out a peace with the Russians. We have to remember that these people lie all the time, and really relying on a lesbian to save you is not very sage, shall we say. But what's being done by the Americans is that they are sort of pushing into power people who would one day properly turn nationalistic. And if Europe is ever going to be independent from the United States, well, it has to have a good relationship with Russia. Because Europe is surrounded by two giants, the United States on one side, the Russians on the other, and the Muslim world, which just wants to destroy it. So the only people to partner with are the Americans, who are mainly interested in the financial interests of BlackRock and the military-industrial complex, and the Russians, who might give you a slightly better deal, some cheap energy, and buy manufactured products from you.
It is important to note as well, though, that both of those giants that we're surrounded by have a vested interest in keeping Europe weak.
Yes.
Because a strong Europe could pose a big problem to both.
Both of them are at the minute, aren't they, really?
But the thing to remember is this. The Russians will never have an interest in the Islamization of Europe because they have Muslims in Central Asia and in Turkey who are a very real threat to them.
Well, they've got a larger Muslim population in Russia than anywhere else in Europe.
Exactly. And they have the historic memory of having to fight wars to liberate Bulgaria and Romania and the Balkans from the Muslim yoke, which is something that the United States never actually helped with. The only time it intervened in that conflict was to help the Muslims in Bosnia and in Kosovo. So that kind of historic memory matters a little bit.
Was that the part where Wesley Clark said that the Europe of the future will not consist of ethno-states and it has to be a big multicultural melting pot?
Yeah.
That was a fun part.
That was wonderful, wasn't it? I mean, I'm very glad that we went through that experiment. It's been excellent for the Mediterranean, for Europe, etc. But just in case you have any delusions about the ability of the Ukrainians to win the war, you just want to look at their regular recruitment style, which just involves snatching people from the streets and forcing them into vans. They just go around grabbing civilians who want nothing to do with the war, beating them, and forcing them to go into unmarked vans so that they can go to the front line. And this keeps on happening. There are 1.5 million men running away from mobilization, and every time they think that peace is more likely, that sort of encourages them not to go into the meat grinder and die on the front line. And you see, I'm sorry, I know this is a horrific video, but you have to see it. They rammed the car of this guy while he's traveling with his daughters to try to pull him out and send him to the front line. This is the extent of the desperation of Ukraine for manpower. And anybody who says that it's in their interest to sort of look at that poor girl crossing herself and praying. Anybody who says it's the interest of Ukraine to continue with this war to import Bomalians. I'm sorry, what?
And this is their own police.
And this is their own police.
Mm.
This is their own police. So, this is just evil. And it should be said. And we should just stop pretending that the Ukrainians are going to win this war. And stop pretending that if they win it will be a good outcome. For Europe or for Ukraine or for Russia. The Russians are our Christian brothers. We can reconcile with them. Europe has always figured out ways to live with Russia in some form of peace. It can be done again.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.